This episode of Ancient Secrets of the Bible will take you back to the very beginning, if we can find where that was. Was there a time and place where the weather was always perfect, the foliage was always lush and green, and exotic fruits were free for the taking? A biblical paradise known as the Garden of Eden. Whether or not such a place actually existed is an enigma that has intrigued man since the beginning of time. And if it did exist, where was this earthly paradise? Scholars and theologians throughout the centuries have searched for the Garden of Eden, but time seems to have erased the key landmarks that would be crucial in finding this enchanting spot. Do pictures taken from space reveal this long-lost utopia? Have scientists finally uncovered evidence that proves there was a real place called the Garden of Eden? We are about to look through the pages of the first continuous recorded history of mankind in the book we call the Holy Bible, as we continue our investigation into some of its most controversial stories and try to answer some very tough questions. Is the Bible a reliable account of miraculous interventions, of angels, apostles, and the power of prayer? Or is it just a collection of stories and myth, as some modern-day critics suggest? Both Bible skeptics and proponents from around the world have contributed to this exciting discussion. Some of these biblical revelations may shock and surprise you. This episode of Ancient Secrets of the Bible puts us in touch with what many people believe is the very beginning of life on Earth. And right at this very moment, there are people from every corner of the world interested in these photographs. Because, believe it or not, one of these satellite images may lead the way to the Garden of Eden.
Most of us have been hearing about the Garden of Eden since we were kids. I mean, it's a nice fairy tale. But there's no evidence that any place even remotely like that exists anywhere. At least not on this planet.
Actually, ancient writings found in the book of Genesis provide us with several tantalizing clues that may point to the location of the renowned paradise known as Eden. But these hints aren't as specific as researchers would like. In fact, several different people claim to have found the Garden of Eden, but they disagree on its location. Is it possible that there's more than one spot on Earth that fits the biblical roadmap? And can we ever know which locale might put us in the right neighborhood? Eden North and Eden South. That's how two leading theories for the location of the Garden of Eden might be described. One camp says that the paradise on Earth was located in the northern part of the ancient world. The other insists that it's thousands of miles to the south, and they have satellite images to prove it. Could it be that one of these factions has actually found the Garden of Eden? Both claim to be using the same biblical documentation to pinpoint its location. So why do they disagree? And how do these theories stack up against the ancient evidence?
The location of the Garden of Eden is defined by the rivers that flow from and around it. Genesis chapter 2 tells us that a river watering the garden flowed from Eden, and there it divided into 4 headwaters. Now, each of these rivers is mentioned in the biblical text: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. Now, the names of the 4 rivers would seem to give us the precise geographical location of the Garden of Eden. All you have to do is find the location of the start of these 4 rivers, and you found the garden. But it's not that easy, because while the Tigris and Euphrates still exist, the other 2 rivers have been lost to time.
How could anyone find the Garden of Eden when 2 of the 4 landmark rivers are missing? For thousands of years, it was an impossible task. But in recent years, satellite technology has spawned much more serious searches for the elusive paradise. What clues can we glean from this heavenly view of the earth? And will they be enough to lead us to the Garden of Eden?
The most likely location for the two lost rivers, the Pishon and the Gihon, would be those places where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers come close enough together that they could meander and cross.
Is this the location of the Garden of Eden? At first glance, it's obvious that this area of Turkey satisfies the requirement of the four rivers. But does the Bible provide any other clues that might prove or disprove this theory? And if so, do these clues point to a different location entirely?
The Bible makes some qualifying statements about where these four rivers of Eden are located. Especially interesting are the descriptions of the two lost rivers. First of all, the Pishon is said to have flowed around the entire land of Havilah, and the Bible tells us that Havilah has great natural resources in the form of gold, onyx, and bdellium. This is an aromatic resin similar to myrrh. The ancients regarded it almost as valuable as gold.
Is there such a place as the land of Havilah? If so, it's certainly not listed on modern world maps. But can we find Havilah by locating its gold? And will this intriguing path lead us back to Turkey or someplace entirely new?
In searching for the location of the Garden of Eden, researchers have to use all the clues available to them. So locating the land the Bible calls Havilah is key. Biblical archaeologists believe Havilah is located in western Saudi Arabia. Here we find one of the richest and longest producing gold mines in the world, known as the Cradle of Gold because it was first mined in early biblical times. In fact, some Bible scholars point to this operation as the most likely candidate for King Solomon's mine. The problem with locating the land of Havilah in western Saudi Arabia is the fact that today the area is one big scorching desert without any apparent traces of rivers having existed there. At least that's what researchers believed until Landsat images taken from space allowed them to make a startling discovery. A world-famous geologist from Boston University, Farouk Elbaz, examined these images and discovered clear evidence of an extinct river, which he named the Kuwait River because at one time it flowed across northern Arabia and reached all the way to Kuwait. So now we've got an extinct river, an area that's rich in gold, and that same area has the natural resources to produce bdellium, just like the Bible says it should. Based on this evidence, some scholars assert that the Kuwait River was probably the Pishon River named in Genesis.
Could the extinct river of northern Arabia be the lost Pishon of Eden? It seems to fit the description given in the Bible, but what about the Gihon River? Is there any trace of it to be found?
The difficulties in locating the Garden of Eden are in terms of history and geography. It's hard to use scientific tools to date the spread of human technology and civilization earlier than 10,000 years ago, though we know that humanity's been here for 40 or 50,000 years. And then the region of Mesopotamia undergoes significant geological change over time. Riverbeds, flood deposits would make it very difficult to try to dig out any evidence very early in humanity's past.
Another clue the Bible gives us to the location of Eden concerns the second lost river, that is the Gihon, which is said to wind through the land of Cush. In the 17th century, translators of the King James Bible equated the biblical land of Cush with the ancient region of northeast Africa known as Cush. But a recent discovery casts doubt on this conclusion. In fact, many Bible scholars now believe that the King James translators made a mistake, and the name of the land where the Gihon River flowed is actually Kashu. If this is true, then we're really onto something, because Kashu is a land archaeologists can identify. It belonged to a people called the Kashites who conquered Mesopotamia in about 1500 BC, and we know that ancient Mesopotamia is located in present-day Iraq.
Because of the misidentification of the land of Cush, efforts to find the Garden of Eden have been stymied for thousands of years. Could it be that the final piece of the puzzle has finally fallen into place, and will it now reveal the location of the last missing river?
Based on this new identification of the land of Cush, many scholars have concluded that the Gihon River of the Bible is probably the Karun River of today. The Karun's course begins in Iran and flows southwesterly toward the Persian Gulf. So, if all the clues are put together, Some scholars conclude that the Garden of Eden must have been located somewhere at the head of the Persian Gulf at a time when all four rivers joined and flowed through that area.
Unfortunately, if the Garden of Eden has been found in the area of the Persian Gulf, the political situation in this part of the world would make it difficult to search for the lost paradise. But why is it important to know where the Garden of Eden was anyway?
It probably doesn't mean anything at all. I mean, even if you found the rivers and everything else, it doesn't prove anything except the guy who made up the story knew where the four rivers were located.
Well, what is the Garden of Eden? The Garden of Eden appears in Genesis chapter 2 at the beginning of the account of creation. And that's where the man is first placed, that's his home, and then the woman is created, and that's her home. And it is a place where God meets with the people. We read that it's to the east, and what's interesting is, particularly in verses 10 to 14, we have a lot of information that sounds very geographical, as though you want to really place it just exactly where it is. It talks about the Tigris River, the Euphrates River. We know where those are today. It talks about the Pishon and the Gihon rivers, and we don't really know where those are, especially if we're looking for them around the Tigris and Euphrates, and it says that the headwaters of these are where the garden was originally.
As it turns out, a search of any kind may be entirely pointless because the site may be out of reach forever. Could it be that the latest round of satellite photos indicate that the Garden of Eden is now underwater? Or does the true Eden exist in yet another location? On the western facade of the Dome of the Rock Mosque in Jerusalem, there is an Arabic inscription which reads, "The Rock of the Temple from the Garden of Eden." The northern gate of the mosque is called the Gate of Paradise, and just inside this gate lies a stone of green jasper about a half-meter square called the Stone of Eden. Is it possible that the building materials for one of the most disputed sites in the world came from the Garden of Eden? Has satellite technology finally revealed its actual location? And if so, can we get there?
With the discovery of the extinct Pishon River in Saudi Arabia and the identification of the Gihon River in present-day Iran, all the pieces of the Eden puzzle have fallen into place. But although the approximate location of the garden has been found, we're no closer to actually seeing it than we were before. The reason being that climate changes have caused the waters of the Persian Gulf to rise since biblical times. And that means the area where the garden was located has been overtaken by the sea.
One of the most amazing artifacts in my collection dates back to about 4400 to 4000 BC. It is a stone. It is made in the pictograph form of an ancient Sumerian river trading boat. On the back of this artifact are engraved Sumerian pictograph symbols that reveal an astounding story. This story relates to a mountain-sized meteorite bouncing off the planet Jupiter and sent plunging into South Central Arabia. As the meteorite entered the atmosphere traveling at 36,000 miles per hour, it broke into pieces. Part of it penetrated the South Central Arabia area, creating the Warbar crater fields and possibly destroying the biblical land of Havilah. The second part pelted the Gulf of Oman in the Persian Gulf area, creating a massive tidal wave and the biblical flood described in the book of Genesis. Based on these catastrophic events, it is very likely the Garden of Eden was buried under the flooding waters of the Persian Gulf.
After thousands of years of searching, has man once again been defeated in his quest for paradise? Is the Garden of Eden lost forever under the salty waters of the Persian Gulf? Or is it possible that all this technology has led us on a wild goose chase? Could it be that the real Garden of Eden is tucked away in some other remote corner of the earth? At least one man has gone back in time to try to find it.
Apart from the story in Genesis, we do have traditions from outside the Bible, including the Babylonians and Sumerians, who mention a magical land beyond the mountains to the north.
Could the legends of ancient cultures lead us to the authentic location of the Garden of Eden? In April of 1997, archaeologist David Rohl set out to find the lost paradise using information gleaned from Sumerian clay tablets that are said to be more than 5,000 years old.
There's a very ancient epic poem entitled En-Merkah and the Lord of Aratta. Now this place Aratta, which En-Merkah's vizier goes to, is beyond the mountains. It's probably the biblical Ararat, the place where Noah's Ark came to rest. And this place, this Aratta, also has a plain. The Sumerian word is Edin, which is the biblical Eden. The Edin is a Sumerian word. It means plain, open land, uncultivated land. It's the sort of thing you would imagine for an Adam and Eve type situation, where we don't have real cultivation at this time. Enmerkar is the king of Uruk, and now this is in southern Iraq today. And his envoy is sent across the mountains, the Zagros Mountains, to a place called Aratta, north of the mountains. And he brings messages from the king of Uruk, Enmerkar. So in fact, he's the first postman in history. Diplomatic relations between Uruk and Aratta weren't going too well. In fact, after about 15 years of arguments between the two kings, Enmerkar eventually invaded Aratta and brought back gold and semi-precious stones to adorn a temple in Uruk. And of course, Eden itself was rich in gold and semi-precious stones. The envoy's journey from Uruk to Aratta involved crossing through 7 gates. Now these gates are like mountain passes or gorges through the mountains. So you're crossing 7 mountain ranges to reach Aratta and therefore Eden. Now this may be similar to what we call the Hebrew tradition of the 7 heavens. And when you reach the 7th heaven, of course, you're in paradise.
Could the Garden of Eden be located in the mountains of western Iran? After all, satellite photos have led other experts to place the biblical paradise thousands of miles away. Could it be that the ancient record is more reliable than modern-day technology? According to some, the evidence appears to show that the third location fits the biblical description even better than the other 2 possibilities.
Satellite technology merely confirms what we already know about the possible location of the 4 rivers connected with Eden that we see in the Bible. Namely, it's those places where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers come close enough together in the floodplain of Mesopotamia where we can get these riverbeds crossing over one another.
Different scholars have suggested different things about this. There are some who look to the real headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates in northern Syria or southeastern Turkey up there somewhere, and have suggested that the author had in mind that the Garden of Eden was originally there. There are others who argue that it maybe should be found in where the Tigris and Euphrates actually meet. That's at a place called the Shatt al-Arab, which then flows into the Persian Gulf. And then they connect the other 2 rivers, the Gihon with a river that flows out of the Kassite or Kush mountains, as the text refers to them, and possibly even a river that originally had its source in Saudi Arabia and flowed from there, but has long since dried up for the past 4,000 years. There's been some satellite photography and connection with a source there, which is the only source in the area for gold, which is also mentioned. It's very difficult to try to place it beyond that, but it is interesting that we learn there's a lot of water in the garden. There are precious stones and gems and minerals in the garden. And there are certain things that take place there.
Looking for the Gihon River is rather difficult. The name doesn't exist today in the modern topography of the region. However, when the Islamic invasion took place in the 8th century AD, they came across a river which we call the Aras today, and they identified as the Gaihun, and this may well be the Hebrew Gihon. 100 years ago, if you looked at encyclopedias, you would have seen the name Gaihun or Gihon Aras.
How is it possible that scholars of the 19th century made the connection between these 2 rivers, while 20th century scholars seem to have missed it? Sometimes it's just a matter of pure luck. For example, who would expect to find clues to Eden's whereabouts hidden in Victorian-era publications? Victorian scholars, it seems, placed the land of Kush in modern-day Azerbaijan and openly published their findings. And in fact, the name Kush has survived to this day.
Victorian scholars were aware of a land called Kosseia, classical Kosseia, which was in the land area of Azerbaijan, and through it flowed the Aras River. And this has identified them with the land of Kush, same as Kosseia, through which the Gihon flowed. So the Gihon Aras is the biblical Gihon flowing through the land of Kush.
Could it be that old-fashioned scholarship has trumped modern technology once again? During his journey to the mountains of Iran, archaeologist David Rohl used information taken from an ancient Sumerian legend to find several key signposts. But were these clues actually leading him to the biblical land of Eden? Several more pieces of the puzzle needed to fall into place before he could be sure of his find. Would it be possible to locate the last missing waterway? Or was the Pishon River gone forever?
The book of Genesis tells us that the Garden of Eden is in the east of Eden, in other words, within the boundaries of the land of Eden. And to the east of our area is a very fertile valley surrounded by high mountain peaks. Now this valley is bordered on the northern side by a mountain ridge called Cush-Adag, and Cush-Adag in the modern language means the mountain of Cush, and Cush is the land beyond to the north of this valley. Identifying the Gihon is a breeze compared to trying to find the Pishon, the fourth river. Now we don't have any rivers in this region with that similar sounding name. However, the fourth major river in the mountain area here is called the Kezel Uizan, which means the long gold in Iranian. Now we think this name Uizan may be the original Iranian version of the biblical Pishon. The only difference is the letters U and P have been interchanged. So we get from Uizan to Pishon or Pishon. Chapter 2 of Genesis tells us very clearly that 4 of the headwaters or sources of 4 great rivers from the region start out in Eden. So all you have to do is actually trace the rivers back to their sources, and there you are in Eden. So why hasn't anybody thought of this before?
Has archaeologist David Rohl actually located the biblical land of Eden? His identification of the 4 rivers of the Bible is certainly startling. And the connection he's made to the land of Cush bears further witness to the theory's credibility. But what about the land of Havilah that's spoken of in Genesis? Does David Rohl's Eden fit the bill?
This fourth river of Eden, the Pishon, flowed through the land of Havilah. On a modern map, this would be Angaran province in western Iran. And this area is indeed rich in gold and semi-precious stones, just as Havilah was rich in gold and semi-precious stones. The name Kezel Uizan, the river, means the golden Uizan, or in the biblical terms, the golden Pishon. And in this area, there are many ancient gold mines.
It was in April of 1997 when David Rohl set off to locate the land of Eden, and so far, all of his research appears to be paying off. He believed he had found the 4 biblical rivers of Eden, along with the lands of Cush and Havilah. But where was the actual garden?
The land of Eden is a vast area, but Genesis 2 tells us specifically that the Garden of Eden is in the east of Eden, in other words, within Eden, but in the eastern part, and that's where you have to look for Adam's garden. We have to realize that the Garden of Eden is a natural place. It's not an artificial garden. The Hebrew words Gan Eden mean a walled garden, but it's not an artificial type of garden. We must envisage a natural space, perhaps a valley surrounded by high mountains. And the Greek word paradise, paradisa, coming from the Persian, also means a royal parkland or enclosed hunting ground. So both ideas tell us that we should be looking for a valley surrounded by high mountains. This valley of the garden is a remarkable place. It's bounded on its west side by a great lake, Lake Urmia, with its marshes. The valley itself is long and thin, running from west to east. Through it flows a beautiful river, which comes down from the mountains. To the south and to the north are high peaks protecting the valley, and to the east a pass which leads out of the garden towards a place called Nukti in the local language, which means belonging to Nukt, and Nukt could be the biblical Nod. Climatologists have worked out that this area was very much lusher in the ancient times, several thousand years ago. The valley itself was protected. It had a sort of microclimate with warm winds coming in from the west. So it was very, very fertile, lots and lots of water, lots of areas to grow plants and to cultivate. This really was a paradise on earth.
With modern satellite technology giving us a God's eye view of our planet, we can now look down on Earth as if it were a treasure map. But so far, we haven't been able to use this knowledge to pinpoint the location of what may have once been an earthly paradise, in large part due to the fact that there's more than one X that marks the spot of the treasure. Will we ever be able to determine which of these locations, if any, was the actual Garden of Eden? Or are we wasting our time looking for a place that no longer exists?
There are those that believe the Garden of Eden was located near today's Tigris and Euphrates rivers, because those are the rivers that are mentioned in the book of Genesis. However, if you also accept the Genesis chapter 7 account of Noah's flood as being historically accurate, then it's easy to understand how the destructiveness of this flood would probably bury the Garden of Eden and any pre-flood rivers under thousands of feet of sediment. It would seem the survivors of the flood would give the rivers around Mount Ararat the same names that they had before the flood, the Tigris and the Euphrates.
Could the actual site of the Garden of Eden still exist, or is it lost forever? Whichever side of the argument you happen to choose, there's no denying that the story of the garden is found in many of the oldest cultural records known to man. For example, the Chinese language may have a reference to Eden embedded in its symbol for the word west. Literally translated, the symbol means two people in a garden. Did the people of this great Eastern culture originally come from the west, perhaps somewhere in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley? And does their symbolic language commemorate Adam and Eve in their garden home? The answers to these mysteries may still be beyond our reach, but the search for the garden will undoubtedly continue, because in a way it represents a quest that all people seek, the quest to return home. Perhaps that home is in our hearts, and only through the ancient secrets found in the pages of the Bible will we ever discover where it lies.